concerning ancient Israel. An ancient curse tablet may show the earliest name of the Hebrew name of God. The tablet is barely larger than a postage stamp. Archaeologists working in the West Bank say they've discovered a tiny curse tablet, quote unquote, barely larger than a postage stamp, inscribed with ancient letters in an early form of Hebrew that call on God to curse an individual who breaks their word. In other words, it's part of God's commandments that was given in the Old Testament. While this was after the Exodus from Egypt, where they went into the Promised Land, and they had to, of course, recommit themselves and consecrate themselves to God's law. And now, while the dating has not been verified, and the find this was about 1,500 BC. Now, while the dating has not been verified and the find has not been published in the peer-reviewed journal yet, its discoverers think the tablet is at least 3,200 years old, and that would make the inscription the earliest known Hebrew text by several hundred years, and the first to contain the Hebrew name of God, they say. But several archaeologists who were not involved in the discovery say they can't assess the find until details of it are published in a scientific journal, and at least one expert cautions that the tablet may not be as old as its discoverers claim. Project leader Scott Stripling, archaeologist and director of excavations for the US-based Associates for Biblical Research, ABR, and this is their image, said that his team found the curse tablet high on MtEbal, just north of the city of Nablus, in December of 2019. And Stripling and his colleagues announced the find at a press conference in Houston, Texas. Details of the tablet, a piece of folded lead sheet about an inch thick, an inch high, and an inch wide, 2.5 by 2.5 centimeters, to be published in an archaeological journal. But the team wanted to make the announcement before news of the object leaked out, Stripling said. 40 photo-alphabetic letters inscribed in an early form of Hebrew or Canaanite on the outer and inner surfaces of the folded lead tablet warn what would happen if someone under a covenant, a legally binding agreement, did not meet their obligations. Quote, cursed by the God Yahweh, end quote, as the inscription reads, using the three letters from the form of the word name, Hebrew of God, that corresponds to the English letters YHW, Yahweh. Now, the curse tablet, Stripling and his team found the curse tablet by a process of wet sifting material, that is, washing sediments with water that had been discarded during archaeological excavations on MtEbal in the 1980s. This particular sediment pile was likely the cast-off material from excavations of the ancient stone structure called Joshua's Altar, high on a ridge of the mountain, he said. Some think the sanctuary may be where the biblical figure Joshua, the successor to Moses as leader of the Israelites, sacrificed animals to God, while others think it's a sacrificial altar from the Iron Age several hundred years later. The stratigraphy of the site, in other words, the dates of different layers of each earth determined by archaeological excavations, suggests that the tablets date around 1200 BC at the very latest, and perhaps as early as 1400 BC, Stripling said. An analysis of the chemical isotopes of lead used in the tablet shows that it came from the mine in Greece that was active during this period, and the very early proto-alphabetic letters, some of which still have forms derived from earlier pictorial symbols or hieroglyphs, match the presumed dates. According to the book of Deuteronomy in the Hebrew Bible, MtEbal was one of the first locations in Canaan seen from afar by the ancient Israelites after they had been led out of the eastern wilderness by Moses. In a biblical passage, Moses called on one group of Israelite tribes to proclaim curses from MtEbal, while another group of ancient Israelite tribes proclaimed blessings from the nearby across the valley, Mount Gerizim. The newly found objects is the only known example of a curse tablet found at the site, although they are common at Jewish sites elsewhere that date from much later Hellenistic and Roman periods, after about the late 4th century BC, Stripling said. Ancient Israelites, if the date can be verified, the inscription on the cursed tablet would push back the earliest known date for literacy among the ancient Israelites by several hundred years. Until now, the earliest evidence was the Khirbet Qeiyafa inscription, dating from about 10th century BC, 1,000 years BC. According to researchers set at Israel's University of Haifa, ABR describes itself on its website as a non-profit ministry dedicated to demonstrating the historic reliability of the Bible, and Stripling believes the MtEbal cursed tablet could be evidence for the biblical story of the ancient Israelites arriving in the region then called Canaan, farther east. He said, we have an ancient text saying that the Israelites arrived around 1400 BC, and then we have evidence of them on mountains where the Bible says that they were writing a language that the Bible says that they used, Stripling said. I think a fair-minded person might be willing to draw the conclusion inductively that there were Israelites there. Other archaeologists, however, suggest that there's little evidence of the biblical story that the Israelites were led to Canaan by Moses. Instead, archaeology suggests that at least some of the Israelites originated in the Canaanite lands that became the Israelite kingdoms. Israel Finkelstein, archaeologist and professor emeritus at Tel Aviv University, who was not involved in the discovery, cautioned that there's a big gap between the description of the find on MtEbal and the claims of the researchers regarding the implications for biblical studies in archaeology. No detailed analysis of the claims would be possible until a scholarly article is published on the discovery, Finkelstein said. But he noted the cursed tablet was not found in a clear archaeological context during an excavation, but in a pile of debris dating from an excavation in the 1980s. He also questioned the proposed dating, noting that comparison of MtEbal site to other sites dated by radiocarbon analysis suggests it may date from 11th century BC, perhaps 2 centuries or more later than what was claimed, and he suggested that the decipherment of the inscription of the tablet could also be subject to interpretation. In general, Finkelstein said, I am irritated by sensational claims of discoveries which ostensibly change everything that we know about the Bible and the history of ancient Israel. This is by Tom Metcalf on Live Science. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.